I am Joshua, 35 years old, and my parents skipped my wedding to attend my brother's housewarming party, only to show up at my office weeks later demanding I sign away my secret inheritance. Before I tell you how I emptied their bank account and took back every single penny, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Last month, my parents flew halfway across the country. It was a 3.5-hour flight from our dreary, rain-soaked hometown to the sun-drenched paradise of Scottsdale, Arizona. They didn't just fly economy either. They bought first-class tickets with the extra legroom, the complimentary champagne, and the priority boarding. They stayed for 10 entire days. The grand occasion that warranted such a lavish expenditure of their time and money? My younger brother Julian's housewarming party. Julian and his husband, Garrett, had just closed on a second home, a gorgeous, sprawling vacation condo right near the mountains. Garrett is a commercial real estate developer pulling in a massive salary, and Julian hasn't had to work a standard 9-to-5 job in his entire life. They already owned a $500,000 primary residence with a pristine lawn and a 3-car garage, but apparently that wasn't enough. And my parents were right there to celebrate their new acquisition. I watched the entire trip unfold through the glowing screen of my phone, scrolling through Facebook in the quiet hours of the night. My mother, Martha, documented every single breathing moment of that vacation. There were exactly 47 photos posted across those 10 days. I counted them. I couldn't stop myself. Day 1 featured a selfie at the airport with the caption, "Arrived in beautiful Scottsdale, so incredibly proud of Julian's gorgeous new place. Our boy has done so well." Day 3 was a gallery of photos showing my dad, Robert, assembling a massive outdoor grill. The caption read, "Helping Julian decorate his Arizona oasis. Family time is the absolute best time. Feeling blessed beyond measure." By day 5, there were pictures of them clinking expensive wine glasses on a balcony at sunset. They didn't just bring their smiles and their free labor. They brought their wallets. According to Julian's own boastful posts, my parents bought them an $1,800 West Elm patio furniture set, and my mother casually handed over $3,000 in cash as a little housewarming gift to help with the finishing touches. This was a $5,000 cash drop for a vacation home, for a son who was already living a life of absolute luxury. I saw every single post. I read every comment. I watched every video of them laughing and toasting to family. And every time I double-tapped my screen, a cold, heavy knot tightened in my stomach. Because my wedding to my brilliant, beautiful fiancée Sarah, was exactly 3 weeks away. My parents had received my heavy, foil-stamped wedding invitation 5 weeks before they even booked their flights to Scottsdale. There was no family group text about my wedding. There was no countdown. There was no excitement. There was just a quiet, suffocating indifference. On November 2nd, the day they flew back from Arizona, I sent my mother a text message. It was simple. "Welcome home. How was the trip?" I watched the 3 little typing dots appear and disappear. She responded 6 hours later. "Wonderful. Julian's place is absolutely beautiful. We're completely exhausted, though. That kind of travel really takes it out of us at our age. Need a week to recover." I didn't respond. I just stared at the text message as I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by half-assembled wedding favors and a stack of vendor contracts I was paying for entirely by myself. Exactly 3 weeks later, that manufactured exhaustion would become the ultimate excuse. 12 days before I was supposed to stand at the altar and pledge my life to the woman I loved, my mother called me. She asked what time the ceremony was. When I told her 2 o'clock, she let out a long, theatrical sigh. She claimed the 30-minute drive from their suburban house to my venue in the city was simply too much. She said her sciatica was acting up and my father's back couldn't handle the traffic. I reminded her they had just flown across the country. She snapped at me, claiming sitting on a plane was completely different. I walked down the aisle while 2 chairs sat entirely empty in the front row. The entire chapel, all 76 guests, saw my parents' choice. They saw exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. And then, exactly 3 weeks after they missed the most important day of my life, my office phone rang. It was a random Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a complex admissions file for the university where I work. My office line buzzed. My receptionist, Dolores, came through the speaker. Her voice sounded strange, a little hesitant. "Joshua, line 2. It's your father. My father never called me at work. In the 10 years I had been employed there, not once had he dialed my office number." I picked up the receiver, my heart suddenly hammering a rapid rhythm against my ribs. "Hello, Joshua," my father said. His voice was tight, breathless, completely devoid of any warmth. "I'm downstairs, in your lobby. We need to talk about Saturday." "What about Saturday?" I asked, completely thrown off guard. "I have some documents. I need to see you right now." I closed my laptop and walked down the stairs to the main lobby. He was standing near the entrance, looking out of place among the college students and faculty members. His gray hair looked thinner than I remembered, his skin pale and slightly clammy. He was wearing his good khakis and a navy polo shirt, the exact same outfit he wore in the photos on Julian's new balcony. But what caught my attention was his hands. They were shaking violently. He was clutching a thick, brown accordion folder against his chest like it was a shield, or maybe a bomb he was afraid would go off. "Dad," I said, keeping my distance. "What are you doing here?" He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't ask how the wedding went. He didn't offer a single word of apology for missing it. He just gestured frantically with his chin. "Is there somewhere private we can go?" I led him into a small conference room with glass walls just off the main lobby. The air in the room felt instantly heavy. I didn't sit down. He did. He placed the heavy brown folder on the polished wood table. The folder seemed thicker than it should be, practically bulging with papers. He looked up at me, his eyes darting around nervously. He slid a single piece of paper across the table toward me. It was a legal document. "We need you to sign this today, Joshua," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "It's about your grandfather's estate. It's urgent." I looked down at the paper. I had no idea what was inside that folder. I had no idea that the document he was pushing toward me was the key to unlocking 20 years of lies, a massive financial theft, and a betrayal so deep it would permanently sever our bloodline. I didn't know he was asking me to participate in a massive cover-up. But to truly understand the weight of what happened in that glass conference room, you need to understand the foundation it was built upon. You need to understand that this betrayal didn't start with an empty chair at my wedding. It started the day my brother was born. I was exactly 5 years old when my brother, Julian, was brought home from the hospital. Most people don't remember things from when they were 5, but I remember that day with a crystal clear, agonizing precision. I remember standing in the doorway of the nursery, holding a small stuffed bear I had picked out for him. I remember watching my mother rock him in the expensive mahogany glider chair they had bought just for his arrival. She looked down at him with a level of adoration I had never seen on her face before. She looked at him like he had personally reached up into the sky and invented sunlight. I remember squeezing the stuffed bear and thinking that maybe, if I was just really quiet, really good, and never caused any trouble, she would look at me that way too. I spent the next 30 years trying to earn that look. She never gave it to me. The divide in our household wasn't just a subtle emotional preference. It was a blaring, neon-lit reality. It was financial, absolute, and woven into the very fabric of our daily lives. When high school hit, the lines were drawn in permanent ink. Julian, the sensitive, brilliant golden child, was enrolled at Holy Trinity Preparatory. It was an elite, private Catholic school with small class sizes, state-of-the-art facilities, and an $18,000 annual tuition fee. They bought him tailored uniforms and paid for his extravagant extracurriculars. I went to Washington High, the local public school. It was free. The textbooks were missing pages. The cafeteria smelled permanently of bleach and stale tater tots. And the class sizes hovered around 40 kids per teacher. When I gathered the courage to ask my mother why Julian got to go to the fancy school with the beautiful campus while I was taking the city bus to a crumbling building, she didn't even blink. She kept wiping down the kitchen counter, not even looking at me. "Julian needs smaller class sizes," she explained dismissively. He's more sensitive to his environment. You're smart, Joshua. You're tough. You'll thrive anywhere. I did thrive, but only because I had absolutely no other choice. While Julian was attending prep school galas and weekend ski trips, I was working 20 hours a week. I flipped burgers, I stocked shelves at Target, I mopped floors. During my junior and senior years, I saved every single minimum wage paycheck, hoarding the money in a basic savings account because I knew, deep down, that when it came time for college, I would be entirely on my own. And I was right. When it came to higher education, the gap between us widened into an uncrossable canyon. I got accepted into the state university with a modest $15,000 academic scholarship. It wasn't a full ride, not even close. When the financial aid packages arrived, I sat at the kitchen table with my FAFSA forms, panicking. My parents refused to co-sign any private loans. We just don't have the liquid assets right now, Joshua. My father told me, not looking up from his newspaper. You'll have to figure it out with federal loans. So I did. I borrowed $89,000 to fund my bachelor's and eventually my master's degree. I lived on a diet of 90-cent ramen noodles and sheer anxiety. I worked overnight shifts at the campus library just to afford my textbooks. Julian got accepted into the exact same state university 2 years later. My parents paid for every single cent. They paid his tuition in full. They paid for his luxury off-campus apartment with the rooftop pool. They paid for his meal plan, his textbooks, and gave him a generous monthly allowance so he wouldn't have to stress about a part-time job. They even shelled out an extra $27,000 for him to do a cultural enrichment study abroad year in Florence, Italy. I remember sitting in my cramped, unair-conditioned dorm room, eating cold soup from a can, scrolling through photos of Julian drinking expensive wine and eating authentic gelato under the Tuscan sun. I remember calling my dad during my junior year. I had found an incredible summer internship program in London that would have guaranteed me a job post-graduation. The program cost $4,000. I had saved $2,000 from my resident advisor stipend. I just needed a little help with the remaining half. My dad sighed heavily into the phone. Joshua, you know we're stretched thin right now. Julian needs a car for campus next semester, and the insurance alone is killing us. Maybe next year. There was no next year for me, but Julian got a brand new car. I remember the day they brought it home for his high school graduation, a sleek, silver Porsche. I remember the smell of the expensive leather. I remember standing in the driveway holding my rusted, second-hand bicycle, while my parents took endless photos of Julian behind the wheel. I graduated in 2012 with honors and a mountain of suffocating debt. Julian graduated years later with zero debt, a glowing Italian tan, and a $3,000 check as a graduation gift. I got a generic greeting card in the mail with $20 tucked inside. I eventually landed a solid job as a senior admissions counselor at the university. I was making a respectable salary, building a career out of helping first-generation students navigate the very financial aid nightmares I had survived. I had a good life. But the desperate child inside me still wanted his parents' approval. So I tried to buy it. Every single month, starting from the day I got my first real paycheck, I sent my parents $400. They called it help with the household bills. I called it what it really was, guilt money. It was the tax I paid for being the son who survived without them. Over 10 years, I transferred $48,000 into their account. Even during the brutal winter when my own heating got shut off because I couldn't afford both my utility bill and my massive student loan payment, I wrapped myself in 3 blankets and still made sure that $400 cleared their account. They never once said thank you. It was just an expectation. Then I met Sarah. Sarah was a middle school English teacher. She was warm, incredibly sharp, and fiercely loyal. We bonded over our shared mountain of student debt and our love for cheap takeout food we ate on my terrible thrift store couch. On our 3rd date, she met my parents. We went to a local diner. Julian was there too, dominating the entire conversation about his upcoming vacation to Cabo. Afterward, as we sat in my car in the parking lot, Sarah looked at me. Her brow was furrowed. Your parents seem very distant, she said carefully. They didn't ask you a single question about your job. They're just focused on Julian. I brushed it off, staring at the steering wheel. He's the youngest. Sarah didn't push it then. But as the years passed and we built a life together, she noticed everything. She noticed that my mother would call Julian 3 times a day just to chat, but would only text me once a month, usually to ask if the $400 transfer was coming. She noticed that when I finally announced my promotion to senior counselor, my father just nodded, said, "That's nice," and went back to eating his soup. When I sent our engagement announcement to the family group chat, Julian responded with a joke, and my mother responded 6 hours later with a single, unpunctuated word, "Congratulations." Sarah was the first person in my entire life to look me in the eye and tell me the ugly truth. "Joshua, you don't owe them that money every month. They don't appreciate it. They don't appreciate you. You're drowning in debt, and you're funding their comfortable lifestyle. They're my parents," I argued, my voice tight and defensive because her words hit too close to the bruised part of my soul. "It's what family does. You help family. Family goes both ways, Josh," she replied softly, placing her hand over mine. "And they are only taking." I wasn't ready to hear it. The conditioning was too deep. I kept sending the money. I kept showing up to awkward holiday dinners. I kept hoping that one day the metaphorical check would clear, and they would finally look at me the way they looked at Julian. I kept setting myself on fire just to keep them warm. But the fire was about to burn out completely. The breaking point, the moment the fragile illusion of our family finally shattered, didn't come with a massive blowout argument or screaming match. Came with a quiet, devastatingly casual phone call. It was a Tuesday evening, exactly 12 days before my wedding. Sarah and I were sitting on the floor of our living room, surrounded by a sea of cream-colored envelopes, addressing the final batch of place cards. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with the word "Mom." I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered it, putting it on speaker so Sarah could hear. "Hey, Mom. What's up?" "Joshua," she started, her voice carrying that specific manufactured tone of heavy fatigue she always used when she was about to deliver bad news. "What time is your ceremony again?" I frowned, exchanging a quick glance with Sarah. 2 o'clock. Right. 2 o'clock. I heard a heavy sigh, followed by my father coughing dramatically in the background. "And the chapel is downtown, right?" "Yes, like we discussed." "Well," she dragged the word out, "that's a bit of a drive for us, you know, with the city traffic on a Saturday." My hand froze in the air. "Mom, it's a 30-minute drive. On a Saturday afternoon, there is virtually no traffic between your house and the venue. What are you talking about? It feels much longer when you're our age," she snapped, her tone instantly becoming defensive. "My sciatica has been terrible lately. The doctor specifically said I shouldn't be sitting in a car for long periods of time. And your father's back is acting up." I felt the blood drain completely from my face. A cold numbness started at my fingertips and rushed straight to my chest. "You just flew to Arizona," I said, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You sat on a cramped airplane for 3.5 hours. You walked around Scottsdale for 10 days. You helped assemble heavy patio furniture." "That is entirely different, Joshua," she fired back, her voice rising in pitch. "We were sitting comfortably in first class. We could stretch our legs. Plus, Julian really needed us there for the housewarming. Garrett's family is all out of state, and they had a lot of guests to entertain. He needed our support to get the house ready. And your other son is getting married in 12 days, I said. My voice cracked. I hated myself for letting her hear it, but I couldn't stop it. "I need your support." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed. "You have Sarah's whole massive family coming. You're going to have plenty of people there to look at you. Julian didn't have anyone. Don't be difficult about this, Joshua. Your mother's health simply has to come first. You understand that, right?" She didn't wait for an answer. "We'll send a nice gift," she added flippantly. "Have a good time." And then she hung up. Click. I sat frozen on the living room floor, staring at the black screen of my phone. I listened to the utter silence in the room. Sarah slowly put down her pen. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't offer empty platitudes. She just crawled across the carpet, wrapped her arms tightly around my neck, and held me. I didn't cry. The deep well of sadness I had carried around for 35 years suddenly flash-boiled into something else entirely. It burned away, leaving nothing but a cold, hard, crystalline clarity. I pulled gently away from Sarah, stood up, and walked over to the large poster board seating chart leaning against the wall. I took a thick black Sharpie, found the 2 seats designated for Robert and Martha Austin in the front row, and crossed a heavy black line right through their names. Saturday, November 22nd arrived. The day was beautiful, crisp autumn air, brilliant blue skies, the kind of day you see in movies. We got married in a historic, exposed brick chapel downtown. There were 76 guests in attendance. And in the very front row on the left side, directly on the aisle where everyone had to walk past them, I placed 2 empty wooden chairs. I didn't let the venue coordinator remove them. I wanted them there. I wanted every single person in that room to see the physical manifestation of my parents' love for me. I wanted them to see exactly who had chosen not to show up. When the music swelled and it was time for the procession, I stood at the back of the chapel, suddenly feeling the crushing weight of the moment. That was when Richard, Sarah's father, stepped up beside me. He was a tall, stoic man who worked in construction. He looked at me, looked down the aisle at the empty chairs, and then placed a heavy, calloused hand on my shoulder. "Joshua," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are a good man. You're a son any father would be damn proud to have. It would be the honor of my life to walk you down that aisle." He didn't wait for my answer. He linked his arm through mine, and together we walked down the aisle. As I passed the 2 empty chairs, I didn't look away. I stared right at them. The void they left didn't swallow me. It freed me. The reception was incredible. People laughed, danced, and celebrated fiercely. During the toasts, Sarah's brother raised his glass and made a point to toast to chosen family, the people who actually show up when it counts. Every glass in the room went up. Not a single person asked about the empty chairs out loud, but everyone knew. We spent our wedding night at a beautiful boutique hotel downtown. Before going to sleep, I pulled my phone out of my tuxedo jacket. I unlocked it. Nothing. No missed calls. No text messages. No apologies. They hadn't even bothered to send a generic congratulatory text. On the 1st of the month, we were sitting in the airport waiting for our honeymoon flight. I opened my banking app on my phone to check our balances. I navigated to the automatic transfer section. There it was, sitting there like a parasite. Scheduled transfer, $400. Destination, Robert and Martha Austin. Frequency, monthly. I hovered my thumb over the screen. I thought about the winter I froze in my apartment. I thought about the student loan debt hanging over my head like an anvil. I thought about the first-class tickets to Scottsdale. I thought about the 2 empty chairs. I pressed delete. A confirmation popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer?" I pressed yes. Just like that, the 10-year umbilical cord of guilt was permanently severed. For the first time in my adult life, I kept my own money. For days later, while Sarah and I were walking on a beach in Mexico, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed, "Dad." I didn't answer it. I let it go straight to voicemail. When we got back to the hotel room, I listened to the message. "Joshua, it's Dad." His voice crackled through the speaker. He didn't sound apologetic. He sounded annoyed. "I noticed this month's, the usual transfer didn't come through. The account is looking a little low. I'm sure it's just an oversight with all your wedding expenses and whatever. Can you give me a call back to sort it out? We have bills due." I listened to it twice. He didn't call to ask how the wedding was. He didn't call to see if Sarah and I were having a good honeymoon. He called because the ATM had stopped working. I deleted the voicemail. I blocked his number, and I blocked my mother's number. I told Sarah I was done. I thought that was the end of the story. I thought I could just fade out of their lives quietly and build my own family from scratch. I was wrong. The storm hadn't even started. That brings me back to the stifling air of the glass-walled conference room in my office lobby. My father, Robert, was sitting across from me, his forehead beaded with sweat, pushing a legal document across the polished wood table. His eyes were wide with a frantic, desperate energy I had never seen in him before. I didn't touch the paper. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest. "What is this, Dad?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level, devoid of any emotion. "Your great-aunt Helen passed away last month," he said, his voice dropping to a hushed, conspiratorial tone as if we were being recorded. "She left some money, a decent amount, $45,000, to be split evenly between you and Julian." I stared at him blankly. "I know Aunt Helen died. I saw the obituary in the local paper weeks ago. You didn't even bother to tell me about the funeral." He flinched, physically pulling his shoulders up towards his ears. "Things have been complicated, Joshua. Emotions have been high. But the issue is the estate lawyer, Thomas Crawford. He's holding up Julian's share of the inheritance. He refuses to disburse the funds." "Why would he hold up Julian's money?" My father swallowed hard. He's doing due diligence, looking into past financial records. He's asking questions about an old college fund, a trust your grandfather Samuel set up for you back in 1999. The words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I uncrossed my arms and leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Grandpa Samuel set up a college fund for me? I took out $89,000 in federal student loans to get through school." "What college fund?" My father wiped his forehead with the back of his trembling hand. He hurriedly opened the brown accordion folder and pulled out a letter printed on heavy, cream-colored legal stationery. It was from Crawford and Associates. The subject line read, "Re. Estate of Helen Mitchell, accounting request." I pulled the letter toward me and read it. It was a formal legal request for a full accounting of a Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, UTMA, custodial account. The account was established on June 14, 1999. The named beneficiary was Joshua Austin. The custodians were Robert and Martha Austin. And the initial deposit amount? $150,000. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. $150,000. My grandfather, who passed away shortly after I started high school, had left me a small fortune to ensure my future. "Where is it?" I demanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a sharp, cutting edge that made my father physically recoil. "Where is the money, Dad? Show me where that $150,000 went." "Joshua, listen to me," he stammered, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "We made difficult choices. The economy was bad. We were underwater on the mortgage. Show me." I slammed my open palm onto the table. The loud crack echoed through the glass walls. Outside, I saw my receptionist, Dolores, jump in her chair and look over with wide, worried eyes. My father's hands shook so violently he could barely grip the papers as he pulled out a thick stack of old bank statements. They spanned from 2008 to 2014. I snatched them out of his grip and started scanning the highlighted withdrawal lines. August 15, 2008. Withdrawal $12,000. Memo, qualified education expense. January 12, 2009. Withdrawal $15,000. Memo, qualified education expense. August 20, 2009. Withdrawal $18,000. Memo, qualified education expense. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. My fingers were shaking, but I managed to search the historical tuition data for Holy Trinity Preparatory, Julian's elite private high school. The tuition for the 2008 to 2009 academic year was exactly $18,000. I kept flipping through the pages, my vision tunneling. August 2011. Withdrawal $27,000. Memo, qualified education expense. $27,000 in 2011. I read aloud, my voice dripping with venom. That was the exact year Julian did his study abroad program in Florence, Italy. I turned to the final pages. 2011 through 2014. 4 consecutive, identical withdrawals of $15,000 each. The exact cost of tuition and room and board at the state university Julian attended. Every single withdrawal matched a major life expense for my brother. But then I went back to the very first major withdrawal. August 2008. $12,000. My mind raced. Julian wasn't in private school yet. What happened in August 2008? August 2008, I whispered, staring dead into my father's panicked eyes. That was the month you brought home the Porsche for Julian's birthday. You bought my brother a luxury sports car using the trust fund my grandfather left me for college. Both our sons needed to be supported, my father pleaded, his voice cracking into a pathetic whine. Family resources are family resources, Joshua. You have to understand, we thought you'd be fine. You were always so strong, so independent. You got academic scholarships. We knew you would figure it out. Julian needed more support. He couldn't handle the stress of student loans. I was fine because I worked 40 hours a week while taking 18 credit hours. I screamed, no longer caring who heard me outside the glass walls. I was fine because I ate instant noodles for dinner 4 nights a week and wore shoes with holes in the soles. I was fine because I clawed my way to survival, not because you helped me. You didn't help me. You robbed me. Don't use that word, he begged, tears welling up in his eyes. He pushed the original legal document toward me again. The estate lawyer just needs you to sign this beneficiary release form. It just says you acknowledge receiving the full distribution of the trust and releases us from any liability. If you don't sign it, the whole estate process freezes. Julian's kids need that inheritance from Aunt Helen for their college fund. I stared at the man sitting across from me. He wasn't my father anymore. He was just a thief in a polo shirt. You stole $150,000 from me, I said, my voice dropping back to a terrifyingly calm register. You forced me to take on $89,000 in debt. You missed my wedding because you couldn't be bothered to drive 30 minutes. And now you come into my place of work and you want me to commit federal fraud. You want me to sign a legal document lying for you, just so Julian can get his hands on even more money. It's not like that, Joshua, please. You're going to destroy the family over money. Get out, I commanded. I stood up to my full height and pointed a trembling finger at the door. Joshua, please, just sign the paper. Get out of my office right now, or I will call campus security and have you physically dragged out of this building in handcuffs. He looked at my face, and he finally realized I wasn't the 5-year-old boy begging for his mother's attention anymore. I was a man who had nothing left to lose. He looked absolutely terrified. He stumbled out of his chair, knocking it backward. He backed away from the table, his hands raised in surrender. He practically ran out of the conference room, pushed past Dolores at the reception desk, and bolted out the glass doors into the parking lot. He was in such a blind, frantic panic to escape my wrath that he forgot the one rule of covering up a crime. He left the brown accordion folder sitting right there on the table. Every bank statement, every legal document, all of it, left behind. I stood alone in the center of the quiet conference room, the faint hum of the air conditioning suddenly deafening. Through the glass, I saw Dolores watching me with profound concern, but she knew better than to interrupt. My heart was hammering against my ribs with such violence I felt lightheaded. I looked down at the polished wood table. The brown accordion folder sat there like a ticking time bomb. My father had been so completely consumed by his own cowardice that he abandoned the very evidence he was trying to hide. He left the murder weapon at the scene of the crime. I slowly pulled the chair back and sat down. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely coordinate my fingers, but I pulled the folder toward me. I needed to make sure I had everything. I started pulling out the bank statements, the transfer records, the communications with the estate lawyer, organizing them into neat, damning piles. As I reached into the very bottom of the expansive folder to check for any loose receipts, My fingers brushed against something thick and textured. It wasn't a bank statement. I pulled it out. It was a sealed envelope. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, and yellowing significantly at the edges, indicating it had been tucked away in the dark for a very long time. The handwriting on the front was written in faded black ink. It was shaky, cursive, and painfully familiar. For Joshua, to be opened when you start college. With all my love, Grandpa Samuel. A sharp gasp hitched in my throat. My grandfather had died in 2003, when I was 13 years old. I hadn't seen his handwriting in over 2 decades. My father had kept this letter hidden in this folder for over 15 years. He had stolen my money, and he had stolen my grandfather's final words to me. I slid my thumb under the flap and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, dated June 14, 1999, my 9th birthday. My dearest Joshua, you are 9 years old today. You came to my house after your birthday party this afternoon and told me all about the new sneakers you got from your parents. You smiled and you seemed happy enough. But I am an old man, Joshua, and I watch people. I watched your face when you talked about Julian's new video game console, the exact one you had circled in the catalog for Christmas, the one they told you was too expensive. I see things, my boy, things the adults around you miss or actively choose to ignore. Your mother and father have always favored Julian. I do not write this to hurt your feelings. I write this because someone in this family needs to tell you the truth, so you don't spend the rest of your life wondering what is wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. You are brilliant. You are kind. You are not less worthy of affection, and you are not less loved. You are simply less visible to people who are too blind to see your immense value. I went to the bank yesterday. I am putting away money for your college education in a secure trust. $150,000. It is not a billionaire's fortune, but it is enough to give you choices. It is enough to let you study what you love without drowning in the stress of debt. It is enough to buy you freedom from their control. This money is for you, not for family expenses, not for emergencies, and absolutely not for your brother. Because you are a minor, the law dictates that I have to make your parents the legal custodians of the account. I am trusting them to do right by you. I pray that they do. But if they don't, Joshua, if they take this money that rightfully belongs to you and use it for their golden boy, I want you to make a promise to me. I want you to fight them. I want you to fight for what is yours with everything you have. Do not let anyone, not even your own blood, convince you that your future matters less than someone else's comfort. If you are reading this, I am likely gone. But know that I saw you, Joshua. Every time you stayed quiet when Julian got praised. Every time you made yourself small so you wouldn't be a burden. I saw you, and I loved you fiercely. Build the life you deserve. And if they try to take it from you, you destroy them. All my love, forever and always, Grandpa Samuel. I read the letter, and then I read it again, and then a third time. The words began to blur together as a hot, stinging pressure built up behind my eyes. For 35 years, I thought I was crazy. I thought I was just a jealous, bitter older brother. I thought the lack of love was a defect in my own character. But my grandfather knew. He saw the toxic, poisonous dynamic of our family clearly, and he had reached out from beyond the grave to validate my entire existence. He tried to protect me. He gave them a test of their character, and they failed in the most spectacular, greedy way possible. They took the only tangible piece of love my grandfather left me, and they fed it to their favoritism to buy a Porsche. I put my head down on the polished wood of the conference table, buried my face in my arms, and I sobbed. I wept for the 9-year-old boy who just wanted his mother to look at him. I wept for the college student eating ramen and crying over loan documents. I wept for the man who stared at 2 empty chairs at his own wedding. I cried until my lungs burned and there were no tears left. And when I finally lifted my head, the crushing weight of sadness was completely gone. In its place was a white-hot, razor-sharp, furious clarity. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Sarah's number. She answered on the second ring, the background noise of her middle school classroom echoing softly. "Hey, is everything okay?" she asked. immediately sensing the shift in my breathing. "I need you to come home as soon as school lets out," I said, my voice eerily calm, possessing a chilling authority I had never heard in myself before. "And I need you to start looking up lawyers in the city. The most ruthless estate litigators you can find. We need someone who specializes in breach of fiduciary duty." "Joshua, what happened?" "They didn't just ignore us, Sarah. They stole from me. They stole my future to pay for Julian's life. And we are going to take them to the ground." This is a moment that changed everything, when I finally regained control of my life. Thank you for your patience in getting this far. You are amazing. Please like the video and leave a comment below to let me know you've been with me. This will not only help more people find this story, but also let me know that my experiences are meaningful to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The very next morning, at exactly 9 a.m., Sarah and I were sitting in the plush, mahogany-lined downtown office of Attorney Carter. He was a 50-something, silver-haired bulldog of a lawyer whose firm's website boasted a terrifyingly high win rate in trust disputes and estate litigation. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I slid the brown accordion folder across his desk. I watched him read Grandpa Samuel's letter. I watched his eyes narrow as he reviewed the bank statements, tracing his finger along the massive withdrawals from 2008 to 2014. Carter leaned back in his leather chair, steepled his fingers, and let out a low whistle. "Joshua, I've been doing estate litigation for 25 years. I have seen families fight over millions. But this is the most arrogant, clear-cut case of breach of fiduciary duty I have ever seen in my entire career." "Is it illegal?" Sarah asked, her hand gripping my knee tightly under the table. "Highly," Carter stated flatly. "Under the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, custodians of an account have a strict, non-negotiable legal obligation to use those funds exclusively for the direct benefit of the named beneficiary. They cannot reallocate the money to a sibling. They cannot use it to pay off household debt. Doing so is embezzlement. It is theft. Plain and simple. What are my options?" I asked. "We strike hard and fast," Carter said, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of an easy kill. "We send a formal demand letter. We request full restitution of the original $150,000. But we don't stop there. We demand statutory interest from 2008 to the present. We also demand restitution for the $38,000 you personally paid in student loan interest as a direct result of their theft. If they refuse to settle, we file a civil lawsuit. And trust me, given these documents, no judge in this state will show them mercy. They will face total financial ruin and potentially criminal fraud charges if the estate lawyer pushes it." I nodded slowly. The scared little boy was gone. "Do it. Draft the letter." But before Carter finalized the paperwork, I knew we needed one more piece of ammunition to make our case absolutely bulletproof. I left the lawyer's office, told Sarah I would meet her at home, and drove straight to my Uncle David's house in the suburbs. Uncle David was my father's younger brother. We hadn't spoken much over the years. He had mostly distanced himself from the family, and I never knew why. When he opened his front door and saw me standing there, looking grim, he just stepped aside and motioned me toward his kitchen table. I sat down and laid out the facts. I told him about the trust fund, the stolen money, the Porsche, the tuition, and the letter from Grandpa Samuel. Uncle David closed his eyes, rubbed his face with both hands, and let out a long, heavy breath that sounded like a decade of repressed guilt. "I knew," he whispered into the quiet kitchen. I stared at him, my jaw tightening. "You knew they took the money? For how long?" "Your dad told me back in the summer of 2009, David said, his voice laced with heavy regret. "We were at a 4th of July barbecue. He had a few too many beers and started bragging about his financial genius. He bragged about how clever he was, reallocating Samuel's money to pay for Julian's fancy private school and that ridiculous sports car, so he wouldn't have to take out a second mortgage. And you didn't say anything?" "I lost my mind on him, Joshua," David defended himself, looking me in the eye. "I screamed at him right there on the patio. I told him he was stealing from his own son. I told him Samuel would be utterly disgusted by him. I threatened to tell you. What did he say? He told me to mind my own damn business. He said if I breathed a word to you, he would cut me out of the family entirely and make sure our mother never spoke to me again. We had a massive falling out that night. That's why I haven't been around for the holidays. I'm so sorry, Joshua. I was a coward. I should have told you. Will you sign an affidavit? I asked, pushing a blank legal pad toward him. Will you put everything you just told me in writing, under oath, for my lawyer? I'll shout it in a crowded courtroom if you need me to, David promised fiercely. He made good on that promise. 2 days later, Carter had a notarized, sworn affidavit from Uncle David detailing my father's confession of the theft from 2009. On Thursday morning, Carter sent the demand letter via certified mail, signature required, and a digital copy via email. It outlined the exact timeline of the theft, cited the specific Iowa state legal codes they violated, and attached Uncle David's affidavit as a devastating warning shot. The total demand was $222,400. They had exactly 14 days to respond, or we were filing suit in civil court. The explosion happened exactly 48 hours after the letter was delivered. My phone rang on Saturday morning while I was making coffee. The caller ID flashed Mom. I answered it, immediately pressing the speakerphone button and setting it on the kitchen island so Sarah could hear. How could you do this to your own family? My mother shrieked the second the line connected. The sound of her panic was visceral, raw, and completely unhinged. Are you out of your mind? Hello, Mom, I said calmly, pouring coffee into my mug. We could lose our house, Joshua. The lawyer says we have to pay over $200,000. Is that what you want? You want to make your elderly parents homeless. I want the inheritance Grandpa Samuel left me, I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. The money you stole. We didn't steal anything, she screamed, doubling down on the delusion. We used it for education. Julian's education counts. We raised you. We put food on your table. You used my money to buy Julian a Porsche and send him to Italy to drink wine, while I ate ramen and worked night shifts in a library to survive. That is theft, Mom. It's textbook embezzlement. You are being incredibly selfish, she cried, playing the ultimate victim card. After everything we've done for you, you're going to ruin us over a misunderstanding? If you go through with this lawsuit, you will tear this family apart permanently. I'm not tearing anything apart, I said, my voice hardening into steel. I'm just done pretending this family was ever whole to begin with. You destroyed it every time you chose him over me. You destroyed it when you looked at 2 empty chairs at my wedding and felt nothing. I hung up the phone. I didn't even give her a chance to respond. I blocked her number. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Julian. Joshua, man, please tell me this is a joke. Julian's voice was frantic. This lawsuit is insane. I didn't know about the college fund. Mom and Dad never told me where the money came from. I swear to God. But you knew I was drowning in student loans while they paid for your entire luxurious life, I pointed out, leaning against the counter. You watched me struggle for a decade, Julian. You didn't care where the money came from, as long as it kept coming to you. I thought they were just helping us differently, he whined, deflecting blame like he always did. It's not my fault they made that choice. Don't punish me for what they did. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm holding them accountable. But it's also not my job to protect you from the consequences of their actions anymore. Julian paused. The facade of the innocent, oblivious younger brother finally cracked. And then, in a moment of sheer frustration, he slipped up. He said the quiet part out loud. Look, you've always been jealous of me. Julian spat, his voice turning cruel. You've always resented me. This is exactly why they like me better, Joshua. Because you pull vindictive stunts like this. The kitchen was dead silent. Sarah gasped softly, covering her mouth. I didn't yell. I didn't curse at him. I just smiled a sad, victorious smile at the phone. He finally admitted it. He always knew he was the favorite, and he weaponized it. "I know they like you better, Julian," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "I've known it since I was 5 years old, and that is exactly why I am taking my money back. Enjoy the housewarming." I ended the call and blocked his number too. The silence in my kitchen was beautiful. The storm was finally subsiding. The toxic debris was being washed away, and for the first time in my entire life, I was the one holding the umbrella. The silence that followed those phone calls was the heaviest, most profound silence I had ever experienced in my entire life. For 35 years, my existence had been defined by the constant, buzzing anxiety of trying to please people who were utterly determined to misunderstand me. I was always waiting for the next rejection, the next slight, the next undeniable proof that I was second best. But standing in my kitchen that Saturday morning, staring at the blocked contact names on my phone screen, the buzzing simply stopped. The air in my home felt lighter. But the legal war was just beginning. Attorney Carter had given my parents exactly 14 days to respond to our formal demand letter. If they failed to respond, or if they refused to meet our demands for the full $150,000 plus the $38,000 in statutory interest, we were going straight to civil court. Carter had made it abundantly clear to them that a public lawsuit would not only expose their financial crimes to the public record, but it would also drag the estate lawyer handling Aunt Helen's inheritance into the fray. Those 14 days dragged on with an agonizing slowness. I went to work every day at the university. I sat at my desk in the admissions office, reviewing applications for eager high school seniors, helping them secure the very financial aid my parents had forced me to rely on. I kept my head down. I did my job. But every time my office phone rang, my heart would completely seize up in my chest. I expected my father to show up in the lobby again. I expected my mother to ambush me in the parking lot with tears and manipulation. They never came. Instead, they did exactly what cowards do when cornered. They hired the cheapest defense attorney they could find and tried to bluff their way out of a steel trap. On day 12 of the deadline, Carter called me into his office. Sarah and I sat across from him as he placed a thin manila folder on his desk. He looked highly amused, a sharp smirk playing on his lips. "I just got off the phone with opposing counsel," Carter began, leaning back in his leather chair and crossing his arms. "Your parents hired a guy who mostly handles minor traffic violations and basic wills. He called me trying to play hardball. He tried to argue that the statute of limitations had expired on the trust fund withdrawals. He tried to claim that because the money was spent on family expenses, the UTMA custodial laws were open to broad interpretation." "Are they?" Sarah asked, her grip tightening on my hand. Carter let out a sharp, genuine laugh. "Absolutely not. I sent him the state Supreme Court precedents. I sent him Uncle David's sworn affidavit proving your father willfully concealed the theft. And then I laid out the nuclear option. I told him that if his clients did not agree to full restitution by Friday at noon, I would not only file the civil suit for breach of fiduciary duty, but I would personally forward the entire file to the district attorney's office for review of criminal embezzlement charges regarding a minor's trust. I felt the breath catch in my throat. "You threatened them with jail time?" I simply reminded them of the legal consequences of stealing $150,000 from a protected account, Carter corrected smoothly. Their lawyer asked for 24 hours to review the documents with his clients. He called me back this morning. His entire tone had changed. He sounded defeated. "Your parents are waving the white flag, Joshua. They want to settle." A wave of pure, unfiltered relief washed over my entire body. My shoulders dropped. I looked at Sarah, and she had tears shining in her eyes. We had won. We had actually won. "What are the terms of the settlement?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Carter opened the manila folder and pulled out a freshly drafted agreement. They agree to pay the full $188,000. That covers the original principal of the college fund and the statutory interest. They agree to sign a legally binding admission of improper withdrawal, which completely clears you of any liability regarding Aunt Helen's estate. In exchange, You agree to drop the civil lawsuit and waive your right to pursue further punitive damages or criminal charges. Can they even afford to pay that? I asked, the reality of the massive number finally sinking in. They don't have that kind of liquid cash sitting in a checking account. My dad is retired, and my mom works part-time. Carter's expression sobered slightly, but his eyes remained hard. They are liquidating their primary asset to cover the settlement. They are selling their house. I sat perfectly still. The house. The 4-bedroom, suburban split-level house where I grew up. The house where I painted the fences and mowed the lawn while Julian played video games inside. The house where I stood in the driveway and watched them hand Julian the keys to a brand new Porsche. They had lived there since 1992. It was their pride and joy. It was the physical manifestation of their upper-middle-class facade. They have to sell the house? Sarah echoed, sounding stunned. It's the only way they can generate the capital within the required 30-day settlement window, Carter explained. Their lawyer told me they originally went to Julian for help. They asked Julian and Garrett to loan them the money to pay you off. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Let me guess. Julian said no. Julian and Garrett absolutely refused, Carter confirmed, a hint of disgust in his voice. According to their lawyer, Julian told your parents that this was their mess, and he wasn't going to drain his own bank accounts to fix a mistake they made 20 years ago, even though he was the sole beneficiary of that stolen money. Even though he and his husband just dropped over $300,000 on an Arizona vacation home. The poetic justice of it all was staggering. My parents had sacrificed my entire future to build a golden pedestal for Julian. They had lied, stolen, and betrayed their oldest son to ensure their youngest never had to face a single hardship. And the moment they were backed into a corner, the moment they desperately needed their golden child to save them from ruin, he turned his back on them without a second thought. He protected his own wealth. He let them lose their home. I want the settlement, I told Carter, my voice firm and unwavering. Draft the final papers. I will sign them today. The next few weeks were a surreal blur of legal formalities and profound emotional shifts. I watched the real estate listing for my childhood home pop up on Zillow. I scrolled through the photos of the staged living room, the empty kitchen, the pristine backyard. The house sold in exactly 14 days to a young couple with a newborn baby. It sold for $320,000. My parents were forced to pack up 30 years of memories, 30 years of accumulated possessions, and move into a cramped, 2-bedroom rental apartment on the other side of town. I didn't feel an ounce of pity. Every time a fleeting thought of guilt tried to creep into my mind, I pictured the 2 empty chairs in the front row of my wedding. I pictured the $89,000 in federal student loans hanging around my neck. The guilt vanished instantly. On January 15th, exactly 2 months after they skipped my wedding, a certified courier arrived at Carter's office. Carter called me on my lunch break. I drove downtown with Sarah in the passenger seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were stark white. We walked into the mahogany office. Carter smiled warmly and slid a heavy, watermarked piece of paper across his desk. It was a cashier's check, issued from a major national bank. The payer was listed as the Robert and Martha Austin Revocable Trust. The payee was Joshua Austin. The amount printed in bold, undeniable black ink was exactly $188,000. I picked up the check. The paper felt strangely light in my hands, considering the immense, crushing weight it represented. This piece of paper was my delayed college fund. This piece of paper was 20 years of compound interest. This piece of paper was my grandfather's love, finally delivered to me after being held hostage for decades. How does it feel? Carter asked, leaning against the edge of his desk. I looked at Sarah. She was beaming at me, her eyes shining with absolute pride. I looked back at the check. It feels like I can finally breathe. We drove straight to my local bank branch. We walked up to the teller window. The teller, a young woman with bright glasses, took the check and glanced at the amount. Her eyes widened comically. She looked at me, looked at the check again, and began typing furiously on her keyboard. "Congratulations on the windfall, sir," she said brightly as she processed the massive deposit. "Is this an inheritance?" I thought about the stolen UTMA account, the Porsche, the empty wedding chairs, the threat of criminal charges, and the sale of my childhood home. I looked at the teller and offered a polite, close-lipped smile. "Something like that, yes." By the time I checked my banking app in the parking lot, the funds had cleared. My available balance, which usually hovered around $2,000 on a good month, now read $190,432.18. It was the first time in my entire life I had ever seen six figures in my own name. We didn't go out to a fancy dinner to celebrate. We drove straight back to our small, rented apartment. I walked into the living room, sat down at my cramped desk, and flipped open my laptop. Sarah pulled up a chair and sat right beside me, her shoulder pressed firmly against mine. I logged into the Great Lakes Student Loan Servicing portal. The website loaded slowly, the spinning blue circle mocking my anticipation. Finally, the dashboard appeared. Current outstanding balance, $52,184.37. This was the monster that had haunted my entire adult life. This was the reason I ate instant noodles. This was the reason I worked night shifts. This was the reason I lived in constant fear of a medical emergency. I navigated to the payment screen. I selected my checking account from the drop-down menu. I moved my cursor down to the payment amount box. I didn't select minimum payment. I didn't select custom amount. I clicked the small, bold button that said Pay in Full. The screen refreshed. A warning prompt popped up in the center of the screen. You are about to make a payment of $52,184.37. This action cannot be undone. Are you sure you wish to proceed? My hand hovered over the mouse. My vision blurred. 10 years of making $700 monthly payments. 10 years of watching the principal balance barely budge because of the crushing interest rates. 10 years of financial suffocation. "Do it," Sarah whispered, resting her hand gently on the back of my neck. "Kill the monster, Joshua." I clicked Confirm. The screen froze for 3 agonizing seconds. And then, a bright green checkmark appeared. Payment successful. Your current balance is $0. I stared at the zero. I stared at it until the shape of the number burned itself into my retinas. 0. Nothing. The debt was entirely gone. I let go of the mouse, buried my face in my hands, and I finally cried the tears I had been holding back for a decade. Sarah wrapped her arms around my shoulders and held me tight as I shook. I was free. I was completely, utterly free. But I wasn't finished. I dried my face, took a deep breath, and turned to Sarah. "Log into your account," I commanded gently. She blinked, confused. "My account? Why?" "Log into your student loan portal, Sarah. Right now." She hesitated, her eyes widening as she realized what I was doing. "Joshua, no. That is your money. You suffered for that money. You went to war for that money. I am not taking a dime of it." "Sarah," I said, taking both of her hands in mine, "you are my wife. You are the only person who looked at me and told me I was worth more than how they treated me. You stood by me when I took on my own family. You held my hand in the lawyer's office. This is our money now, and we are starting our marriage with a completely clean slate." She argued with me for 10 minutes, crying and shaking her head, but I was absolutely relentless. Finally, she logged into her portal. Her remaining balance from her teaching degree was $44,890. I typed the numbers in. I clicked Pay in Full. In the span of 20 minutes, we wiped out nearly $100,000 of institutional debt. We destroyed the financial cages that had kept us trapped since we were 22 years old. We ordered a large pepperoni pizza, sat on the floor of our living room, and just stared at the wall in stunned, joyful silence. By late February, the bitter cold of winter began to thaw, and so did the last remnants of my anger. With 0 monthly debt payments and nearly $90,000 left over from the settlement, We realized we didn't have to rent a cramped apartment anymore. We called a realtor. We spent 3 weekends looking at houses. We didn't want a massive, sprawling mansion in a gated community. We didn't want the kind of house my parents had desperately clung to for status. We wanted a home. We found it on a quiet, tree-lined street on the edge of the city. It was a beautiful 1940s craftsman bungalow. It had 3 bedrooms, original hardwood floors that creaked slightly when you walked on them, a brick fireplace, and a wide, inviting front porch with plenty of room for a swinging bench. The asking price was $245,000. We put down a massive $60,000 down payment directly from the settlement funds. We secured a low-interest mortgage for the rest. Our monthly mortgage payment was actually less than what we had both been paying combined toward our student loans. But this time, the money wasn't vanishing into a corporate black hole. This time, we were building equity. We were building our future. The day we got the keys, I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the sturdy brick chimney. I pulled Sarah close to my side. "This is ours," I said, the weight of the word feeling incredibly heavy and profound. "Nobody bought this for us to hold it over our heads. Nobody can take it away. It's just ours." We spent the next month painting walls, buying furniture that wasn't from a thrift store, and making the space our own. My father never called to ask for our new address. My mother never sent a housewarming gift. Julian never texted to congratulate me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care. Their absence wasn't a punishment anymore. It was peace. It was the quiet, steady calm of a beautiful new morning. But even as we settled into our perfect new life, I knew I had one final piece of business to take care of. I still had roughly $30,000 left from Grandpa Samuel's stolen fund, and I knew exactly what I needed to do with it to honor the man who truly saved my life. The idea came to me late one night while I was sitting in the glow of the brick fireplace in our new living room. I was looking at the framed copy of Grandpa Samuel's letter that I had placed on the mantel. His shaky handwriting served as a daily reminder of his fierce, protective love. He had written, "This money is for you. It is enough to give you choices. It is enough to buy you freedom." My parents had stolen that freedom from me for a very long time, but I had clawed it back. I had my choices now. But as I sat there, thinking about my job in the university admissions office, I thought about the hundreds of students I met every single year who were standing exactly where I stood at 18. Kids who were brilliant, capable, and driven, but who had absolutely no financial or emotional support from their families. Kids who were entirely invisible to the people who were supposed to champion them. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't go back and protect the 9-year-old version of myself who watched his brother get everything. But I could protect someone else. The very next morning, I walked into the university's central administration building and scheduled a meeting with the director of the university foundation. I brought a cashier's check for $25,000. I sat across from the director, a kind woman named Margaret, and laid out my plan. "I want to establish an endowed scholarship," I told her, my voice steady and resolute. "I want it named the Samuel Mitchell Memorial Scholarship." Margaret smiled warmly, pulling out the necessary paperwork. "That's a wonderful tribute, Joshua. Do you have specific criteria in mind for the applicants?" Usually, donors look for specific majors or high academic percentiles. "I don't care about their major," I said firmly. "I don't care if they want to study engineering or art history. The criteria is this. The scholarship is strictly for first-generation college students, or students who can prove they receive zero financial contribution from their immediate family. I want this money to go to the kids who have to work night shifts to buy their textbooks. I want it to go to the students who have to fight for their right to be here." Margaret looked deeply moved. "We have a lot of students who fit that exact description, Joshua. This endowment will change lives." We finalized the paperwork that afternoon. The $25,000 was invested in the university's massive endowment portfolio. It would generate enough interest to award a solid $3,000 grant to one student every single academic year, in perpetuity. Long after I was gone, Grandpa Samuel's money would still be buying freedom for kids who needed a lifeline. 3 months later, The foundation sent me a thick folder containing the essays of the top 5 finalists for the inaugural award. I sat at my kitchen table with Sarah and read through them. They were all heartbreaking and inspiring, but the third essay completely stopped the breath in my lungs. It was written by a 19-year-old sophomore named Emma Rodriguez. She was a journalism major. In her essay, she detailed how she was currently working 2 part-time jobs, one in the dining hall and one as a night shift security monitor, just to cover her basic living expenses. She wrote about how her parents had completely cut her off financially because they fundamentally disapproved of her chosen career path. They wanted her to stay home and work in the family business. When she chose her own path, they told her she was entirely on her own. "I am exhausted," Emma wrote in her final paragraph. "There are days when the weight of the debt and the sheer physical exhaustion make me want to quit. But I know that if I give up, I am proving them right. I am proving that my dreams aren't worth the struggle. I just need a little bit of help to cross the finish line." I looked up at Sarah. Tears were streaming silently down her face. She tapped her finger firmly on Emma's application. "It's her. It has to be her." I arranged to meet Emma in my admissions office the following Tuesday under the guise of a routine financial aid review. She walked in looking exactly how I felt at 19. Perpetually tired, carrying a heavy backpack, her eyes cautious and guarded. She sat down across from my desk, nervously twisting the strap of her bag. "Emma, thank you for coming in," I said, offering a gentle smile. "I know you're busy with classes and your jobs. Is there a problem with my federal loan disbursement?" she asked quickly, panic immediately edging into her voice. "Because I submitted all the verification forms last week. I swear. There is no problem with your loans, Emma," I reassured her. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope bearing the university's official seal. I slid it across the desk toward her. "I called you in here today to tell you that the scholarship committee has reviewed your application. You have been selected as the very first recipient of the Samuel Mitchell Memorial Scholarship." Emma froze. She stared at the envelope like it might explode. "What?" she whispered. "The grant is for $3,000, I explained, keeping my voice soft. "It will be directly applied to your tuition balance for the upcoming semester. You don't have to pay it back. It is yours." Emma slowly reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the envelope. She opened the flap, pulled out the official award letter, and read the bold print. A single tear escaped her eye and rolled down her cheek, landing on the paper. Then the dam broke. She covered her face with both hands and began to sob. It wasn't a quiet, polite cry. It was the ugly, visceral, chest-heaving sobbing of someone who has been carrying a crushing weight for years and has finally been allowed to set it down. I let her cry. I knew exactly how that relief felt. I had felt it in the lawyer's office. I had felt it when my screen flashed a zero balance. "I don't know what to say," she choked out, hastily wiping her face with her sleeve. "Thank you. Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means. I was going to have to drop a class next semester to pick up a third shift." "You don't have to drop anything now," I told her. "My grandfather left me money to go to school when I was a kid. My parents took it from me. I had to fight a very long, very ugly war to get it back. And now, I want to make absolutely sure that someone like you doesn't have to struggle the exact same way I did." Emma looked at me, her eyes wide with understanding. "You're the donor." "I am the custodian of the fund," I corrected gently. "My grandfather is the donor. Use it wisely, Emma. Build your future. And please remember this. You deserve to be here. You are worthy of this help." She left my office clutching that envelope against her chest like a shield. I watched her walk down the hallway, her steps visibly lighter, her posture straighter. I closed my office door, leaned against the wood, and smiled until my cheeks ached. I couldn't go back in time to save myself, but I had just saved her. The cycle of trauma ended with me. The cycle of generosity started right here. The following Sunday, Sarah and I hosted a dinner party at our new house. The dining room table, a beautiful solid oak piece we bought together, was set for 8 people. The house smelled incredibly warm, a mix of roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, and fresh bread. Sitting around my table were the people who mattered. Richard and Helen, Sarah's parents, who treated me like their own flesh and blood from day one. Sarah's brother and his wife. And sitting right across from me, looking healthier and happier than he had in years, was Uncle David. I stood up at the head of the table and picked up my wine glass. The room immediately quieted down. "I want to say something," I started, looking around at the smiling faces looking back at me. 6 months ago, I got married with 2 empty seats in the absolute front row of the chapel. 3 months ago, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, preparing to destroy my own parents in court to reclaim my stolen future. I won't lie to you all and pretend that this journey didn't hurt. It did. It broke my heart to realize that the people who brought me into this world were never going to be the people who protected me. I paused, reaching out to take Sarah's hand. But I look around this table tonight, and I don't feel broken anymore. I'm sitting in a room full of people who chose to show up. Not out of obligation. Not because of a guilt trip. Because you wanted to. Because you love us. I raised my glass higher. I want to propose a toast. To my Grandpa Samuel. He saw the truth when everyone else was blind. He gave me the weapon I needed to fight back. He gave me my freedom. Uncle David raised his glass, his eyes shining with unshed tears. To Samuel. He would be so damn proud of the man you became, Joshua. Richard raised his glass next. And to family. The kind you don't inherit, but the kind you choose to build yourself. To chosen family. Everyone echoed in unison, the sound of crystal clinking filling the warm air of my home. Later that night, long after the guests had gone home and the kitchen was cleaned, I walked out onto my front porch. The neighborhood was quiet, the streetlights casting a soft, golden glow over our manicured lawn. The air was cool and crisp. I leaned against the porch railing and looked down at my hands. I didn't owe anyone $400 a month. I didn't owe the federal government $89,000. I didn't owe my parents my silence, my obedience, or my sanity. The trust fund my grandfather left me was supposed to buy my freedom when I was 18 years old. My parents stole that money, and in doing so, they stole a decade of my life. They forced me to walk through the fire, but they severely underestimated what the fire would do to me. It didn't burn me to ashes. It forged me into iron. I didn't just get my money back. I got something infinitely more valuable. I learned a profound, unbreakable truth. Freedom is not a gift that someone else hands to you on a silver platter. Freedom is a territory you have to violently reclaim. Freedom is looking the people who hurt you directly in the eye and refusing to play their twisted game for one more second. My parents spent my future on the golden child they always wanted. But I took the ashes of that betrayal. I took my grandfather's enduring love, and I built a vastly superior life for myself. A life built on truth, on chosen family, and on the absolute certainty that I am and always have been enough. I turned around, walked back through the front door of my beautiful home, locked the deadbolt with a satisfying click, and turned off the porch light. The storm was over. The morning was here. Listen, guys. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my entire story, it's this. You cannot heal in the same environment that broke you. For years, I believed that if I just gave a little more, sacrificed a little harder, or stayed quiet enough, my parents would finally see my value. But toxic people don't magically change just because you suffer gracefully. Love is not a transaction, and you should never have to buy your family's basic respect. The hardest lesson I had to learn was that setting boundaries isn't a betrayal of your family. It is the ultimate protection of your own peace. My grandfather gave me the financial means to fight back, but the courage to actually walk away and cut the cord? I had to find that within myself. I had to realize that walking away from toxic blood ties opens the door to building a chosen family who will sit at your table and celebrate your victories without jealousy or conditions. I want to hear from you. What is the biggest lesson you're taking away from my journey today? Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family dynamic to save yourself? Please share your perspective in the comments below. Let's support each other. Or, if my story simply resonated with you and gave you a little bit of hope, just comment the word good down below so I know you appreciated the lessons learned here today. Thank you for listening, and remember, never stop fighting for the life you deserve.